You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Feel like who art Ed?
We tried to spice it.
Who art is Mr. Wood art Ed me?
Good. Either way, it's ambiguous. It works on so many levels.
I know.
That's off to a great start.
Welcome to Who Arted, weekly art history for all ages. I'm your host, Kyle Wood, and once again, my guest this week is Julie Averbach, the founder of the Smarty Virtual Museum Tours, as well as the author of the new book, The Art of Trader Joe's. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Kyle. I'm really excited to talk about two of my favorite things, art and Trader Joe's.
I am really excited. I love this book. Thanks for sending the copy, by the way. As soon as I saw the title, I was hooked. I am one of those people who is a big fan of art that is accessible. And, on this show, I have done episodes on all sorts of pieces in museums, as well as episodes on the artistry behind Mario and Lego creations and Lego sets and stuff like that. And so as I think I kind of already have some idea as to why this would draw you to it, but for the audience, why'd you choose Trader Joe's as the subject here?
Yeah, so my interest in Trader Joe's art goes back to early 2021. When I was in pandemic isolation and lockdowns, I watched a documentary called Helvetica. It's a documentary about the history of the typeface Helvetica and the role of typography in graphic design. This documentary completely opened my eyes to the role of typography as an art form that surrounds us every day, but yet we rarely take the time to notice it. So as soon as I watched that documentary, I wanted to go somewhere where I would see interesting fonts and typefaces. Trader Joe's was the first place that came to mind for me. So I jumped in the car, rushed to Trader Joe's, and I started looking closely at the different lettering styles that they have on their product packaging. Once I started to look closely at the typography and graphic design at Trader Joe's, I realized that there was art everywhere. I started to appreciate the bold colors and the eye-catching graphics on their packaging, the handmade sign art throughout the stores. And that was the moment that really jump-started this whole love affair that I have with Trader Joe's art. I went on to write my college thesis in art history on Trader Joe's art. And over the last 3.5 years, I have been researching this topic. I've also visited over 150 Trader Joe's stores and counting across 20 US states, all in the process of discovering the art in Trader Joe's stores, this art that's very accessible and a part of our everyday experience of the world.
Yeah, I think that's one of those things that a lot of people don't realize is how much work and design goes into the everyday objects and the spaces we inhabit, and we become kind of blind to it. In my classroom, I always talk to students and I'm just like, art is not just the stuff that we see going up on the wall in museums. The museum itself is a work of art. The bench that you sit on, somebody sat down and designed that bench. The table that is holding up my laptop, all of this stuff, industrial designers, advertisers, like there are all sorts of different art forms all around us. And once you start to notice it, it's one of those things you can't like unsee and realize that there's so much happening. And as I was looking through your book, one of the things that really struck me was just like how much traditional fine art is referenced in Trader Joe's. And then it started to get me thinking, and I want to get your thoughts on this. Why do you think a company chooses to do this stuff? Because like I remember a while back I did something on the Scream, and the Mars Candy Company put out that reward of 2 million dark chocolate M&Ms for the return of the Scream when it had been stolen one of the times. And I started to think like there are a lot of occasions where companies work with art in lots of different ways. And sometimes it's like a, BMW with Jeff Koons, and I got to look up if those are the correct names and brands and stuff. But like there are some times where an artist works directly with the company, and sometimes a company just kind of like parodies or gloms on to existing art. Like, why do you think that is happening?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. There's so many fun crossovers between the world of art history and the world of pop culture. And in the case of Trader Joe's, it is really unexpected that a grocery store would invest so deeply in art. And what I find, I think, the most incredible about Trader Joe's is that in every single Trader Joe's store, there are actually in-house artists who create all of the signs and murals by hand. These signs
Wait,
could be anything. Oh,
so it's
yes.
every store has an artist or artist team, and it's not like one Trader Joe's corporate team that goes and store to store.
So it's all at the individual store level. So every store has sign artists. It could be full-time sign artists, or it could be crew members or employees who work part-time on other tasks, but also contribute to the art in the store. And it's all done at the local level. So they create every single sign, whether it's a small label on a shelf or a large chalkboard style sign capping off an aisle, or the murals that wrap around the walls of the store. And also, a lot of these artworks are created by artists who are working in an art studio physically inside the grocery store. It could be a hidden back room or an attic with art supplies where these artists are creating every single sign by hand. Not to mention that Trader Joe's artworks are also ephemeral. So the store is constantly swapping out the signs as it introduces new products and the seasons change. So through my research, I've come to view Trader Joe's as this ever-changing art gallery where you're always going to see new things. In a lot of cases, Trader Joe's art, where artists and artworks are also referencing famous works of art, as you're saying, the Mona Lisa, the Starry Night. And I think that has to do with Trader Joe's artists being art lovers themselves. So they're constantly in conversation with the larger stories of art history and reflecting on those works in their own Trader Joe's parodies and sign art.
Oh, that's interesting. So that's really cool that they keep it local. I mean, I think of Trader Joe's as a big national chain, but when I walk into the store, there is a different vibe. And it's kind of cool that it's all local artists and they're leveraging the local talent that they have in the community. Because, I mean, I don't know if Trader Joe's is just, you know, recognizing trends and people's want for that local touch and connection, or like maybe that's part of their whole marketing scheme, or maybe it's just, you know, they're a cool company that puts out good vibes. But that is kind of interesting.
Yeah. The local connection is very much a part of Trader Joe's brand. So each store is unique and it's designed to reflect the community where that store is located. So a store in New York City might have a mural of the Statue of Liberty holding up a Trader Joe's corn can, whereas a store in San Francisco could have a three-dimensional model of the Golden Gate Bridge. So each store has this local artwork and personalized charm, which we can contrast with your typical grocery store, where in most large grocery chains, the design schemes and the sign artwork tends to be kind of copy and pasted across different locations. So a store in one city would look more similar to stores in other cities. At Trader Joe's, each store is unique and it has this impression of being a local neighborhood grocery store, despite the fact that it's part of this chain of more than 500 locations nationwide.
So then I start to think that's kind of interesting, because when I think of Trader Joe's, one of the things I like about Trader Joe's is that they have stuff that I don't necessarily see at the standard grocery store. At other chains, or even the local, like, you know, by my house, I've had, you know, some smaller grocery stores and stuff like that. But when I hear the name Trader Joe's, even the name sounds like a trader. It's like exotic, you know, the trade routes and stuff. And then at the same time, there's this local connection that they're trying to build, which in some ways it feels like there's some cognitive dissonance there. I mean, it works. No shade to them. Please don't sue me. I just it's interesting. I start to think about, because I am always thinking about like, what does this signify? Why choose to parody the Mona Lisa or Starry Night or the Statue of Liberty? I mean, the Statue of Liberty in New York obviously sends a signal to the local community, but I wonder why it is artworks instead of other things. Like, what does that signify about these works becoming part of popular culture? Or is it signifying Trader Joe's becoming somewhat, artistic in their corporate, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, yeah, I think that Trader Joe's really uses art as a way of elevating its brand and driving a lot of customer loyalty and attachment to Trader Joe's. If we think about, for example, a product like their Caesar salad label actually features an image of the ancient Roman sculpture Augustus of Prima Porta from the Vatican Museum. So we might ask ourselves, why would Trader Joe's feature an ancient Roman sculpture on its Caesar salad label? I would say that Trader Joe's is trying to elevate this private label product into something that feels like an affordable luxury. So by featuring this artwork on its label, the product itself is inheriting some of the refinement and luxury that we associate with the world of fine art. So Trader Joe's is wrapping its products in a little bit of magic in the form of artwork.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that makes sense. When I've bought Apple products, the packaging sends this signal that like this is the most special. Like, you ever open those boxes? It's layer upon layer of cardboard and delicate wrapping, and it sends this signal that like, I don't know, it's a laptop, but maybe it's the Ark of the Covenant. I don't know. It's just something special inside this box. But then, when I think of like Trader Joe's, you're right. The packaging, the fact that it is an art reference, I think sometimes it gives me this like sense of accomplishment that I recognize a work of art that's hidden. It's an Easter egg or something. It gives a warm vibe that probably in some ways does make me pick up that salad kit instead of another.
Yeah, it's a treasure hunt at Trader Joe's because so many of the artworks at Trader Joe's have these centuries-long histories. And so there's so many little nuggets for you to discover as you're exploring the store, both in terms of the products, which are constantly changing selection, and a treasure hunt in terms of the artwork. Another feature of the Trader Joe's packaging is also how it relates to Trader Joe's global theming. So you had mentioned that each Trader Joe's store has a diverse product selection where they're highlighting products from a range of different global cuisines. And Trader Joe's really uses product packaging as a way of tying into that global theme. So each product is often packaged in a way that links that product to a specific sense of place. For example, on the Mexican taco sauce, you'll see a print of a Mexican skeleton, whereas on a can of French roast coffee, you'll see an image of the Eiffel Tower. Or on the Ethiopian coffee, a reference to traditions of Ethiopian basket making. So Trader Joe's is making all these different references to global art history on the packaging, also as a way of facilitating imaginary travel and taking us on a journey to the place or culture that's associated with that food product.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess in some ways it kind of reminds me of when I've talked to other people about how a work of art goes from the fine art context to pop culture. We see certain things, like we see things that become a part of pop culture tend to have a very striking image, but there's also a lot of simplicity and the way that it can be shorthanded and still recognizable as it's reproduced in posters and t-shirts and postcards and stuff like that. Like Like, I know later we'll talk about American Gothic, which has been parodied so many different times. And there are a few elements of the composition that you kind of have to have in there, but then you can still reduce it. Like, we don't need to see the faces. If it's a blank silhouette in a skin tone, we recognize that as a symbol when we see the clip art rendition of it and stuff like that. And I think that's probably true with the works that they're selecting, that's going on the labels and all of that. And I guess that might be a good time to segue to the ads that actually pay for this show, because we have no affiliation with Trader Joe's. And then after a short break, we'll get into a couple of the specific works we've seen parodied in Trader Joe's and the art of Trader Joe's. Now, I am back with Julie Averbach, the author of the new book, The Art of Trader Joe's. And as an art lover, I cannot stop seeing all of these artworks being parodied now. So as if I didn't have enough running through my brain 24/7. Thank you, I guess, for that. But I do enjoy these Easter eggs I'm seeing. I thought it might be nice to talk a little bit about some of the specific ones you've noted. I mean, your book, you cover a lot of stuff that's been referenced, but as somebody in the Chicago area, I want to stick to the stuff that's in my hometown museum so that on the off chance one of my students ever listens to this, they have no excuse not to check out the real thing in the museum at the Art Institute of Chicago. You know, in your book, you talked a little bit about Seurat's Sunday Afternoon on La Grande Jatte. Don't ask me to pronounce that again, because that's the best I think I've ever done. When you look at that and then the parody version of it, what are you noticing about the way it's adapted in the new context and what it signifies to you?
Yeah, so one of the themes that I've been really excited to explore in my research on Trader Joe's is how Trader Joe's artists often reference these famous works of art. So they're using these classic works of art as sources of inspiration, but then also adapting and transforming classic artworks to fit Trader Joe's brand. And one example of that would be Trader Joe's numerous parodies of A Sunday Afternoon on La Grande Jatte. In the original painting by Georges Seurat, we see people in a park on a sunny Sunday afternoon. People have come to stroll and lounge in the shade at the bank of the Seine River. Although this scene is technically a leisure scene, there is something stiff and formal about this painting. The figures are posed almost like wooden dolls in their bustle skirts and top hats. So we can keep that in mind as we explore some of Trader Joe's parodies of A Sunday Afternoon. While I was at a Trader Joe's in Chicago, as I was headed towards the restrooms and looked up, I saw a parody of the painting where Trader Joe's artist had really closely replicated Seurat's original composition, but they had inserted Trader Joe's groceries into this park scene. So you would see park goers lounging on the grass and dogs sniffing around for a box of Trader Joe's dog treats, a woman with a glass of wine. And by simply inserting Trader Joe's groceries into this classic park scene, Trader Joe's artist really added a sense of ease and a casual air to this painting that I think is a really stark contrast with the more tight, stiff, and formal atmosphere in the original Seurat painting.
Okay, but I'm going to put you on the spot here. I do have to ask, was the most important element of that composition still present? And by that, I mean the pet monkey.
Oh gosh, I have to take a closer look. I mean,
that is my favorite Easter egg in the painting. Students' minds are always just blown as I point out, like there's a woman just casually walking or stiffly walking her pet monkey. And you're right. It is initially a stiff composition. I mean, Seurat, he did like 60 studies of it. So like I can see where it would feel very stiff and formal, because from everything I've read, seems like he was a very stiff and formal person, very scientific and analytical, and methodical and respect. But it was a stiff painting, especially when you consider like late 19th century, everyone else is loosening up and he's doing these super tight little dots across like a 7 by 10 foot painting. But it's funny how the addition of Trader Joe's stuff there, like that just makes me kind of laugh a little bit as I think of like, you're taking this very formal thing. It seems like you're lightening it up, right? Like it's just a little bit of a wink and a nod. Like we don't have to be so serious, even with a very serious composition that someone spent years painting.
Right, absolutely. Trader Joe's brand is really associated with play, humor. It's very quirky. So I think they bring that attitude of playfulness to these classic works of art. So they're really crossing the boundary between so-called high and low art, the world of the grocery store and the world of the art museum. And as you were saying, the message is that we don't always have to be so serious. We can take these iconic works of art and adapt them, make them our own, make them contemporary. And these artworks can continue to absorb new meanings throughout time. One of my other favorite Trader Joe's parodies of this painting is actually in a store in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I was just there this past weekend. And in this case, it's a large-scale mural on the facade of the building. And this mural is called Sunday Afternoon on the Charles River. It's a modern-day restaging of the Seurat painting, in this case, set at the Charles River, which runs between Boston and Cambridge. And again, here we see people picnicking and lounging at the bank of the Charles River, families enjoying snacks like Trader Joe's tortilla chips and JoJo cookies, people rowing in the river, kids playing soccer on the grass. And once again, I think the artist is easing some of that stiffness and monumentality of the original Seurat painting to create something that radiates warmth, joy, and is very relatable to us. We're seeing people smile and laugh and seemingly genuinely enjoy their Sunday afternoon at the riverside. And in this case, the artwork is actually signed. So we know that the lead artist is a local Cambridge muralist named David Fichter, who even includes his daughter as one of the young figures in this painting.
Oh, is she the one who's breaking the fourth wall?
Yes, there's one child at the left side of the mural who is wearing a straw hat and is enjoying a peach. And that is a reference to the artist's daughter. And yes, she's looking directly at the viewer.
Oh, that's funny. It's funny because I'm in my head just doing the comparison in the shift of tone between, Seurat's version and what's happening with the Sunday afternoon on the banks of the Charles or whatever. Because with Seurat's, it felt so stiff and serious. And like the girl looking out has this expression. Like I almost think of her as just like thinking, what is to become of these people, because there's that little bit of social commentary, especially when you look at the bathers on the other bank in a separate composition and like the factories and the smokestacks in the background and the juxtaposition or comparison between what we see in that painting and the people in the idyllic upper class Isle of La Grande Jatte. And some other people, the ladies out fishing and, looking for other connections and stuff like that. But, here it's like, well, what's to become of these people? It sounds like they're going to have a picnic and they're going to have a good time and it's going to adapt to different circumstances. But people are always going to find a little bit of leisure and a little bit of joy, and they might loosen up a little bit. But it feels like the answer to that question of what will become of these people in Seurat's work is that the style will change, but not a whole lot else.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I mean, another interesting aspect of this comparison is also how Trader Joe's artist emulates some of the technique of the original Seurat painting, because we often hold up this painting, Sunday Afternoon on La Grande Jatte by Seurat, as a classic example of pointillism, where the artist is applying little microscopic dabs of distinct colors, which blend together in the viewer's eye as we stand back and admire the whole scene. In the Trader Joe's mural spearheaded by David Fichter, the figures are very realistically rendered in a smooth and blended way. But if you look really closely at the grass in the Trader Joe's painting, the artist has applied little dabs of distinct color to create light and shadow. So it's not only in the composition that they are riffing on the original Seurat painting, but also some of the technique as well.
Yeah, which I think makes sense, because when you stop to think about like what are the elements that are needed to make something recognizable, in Seurat's work, like the dots, and I feel like I need to also point out, gotta stop saying that. He is known for that pointillism, although he preferred the term divisionism because he felt like he was dividing it into these discrete bits of color. But that is such an important characteristic of it, is the construction, the materiality of it, because that's what he was investigating. That's core to the art. And I think it's important that they're faithful in that. It's just like in any parody of American Gothic, which was another one that stood out to me in this, you've got to have that window, because the window was the whole inspiration behind it. If I recall the story correctly, Grant Wood is driving down the highway and sees this house with what he considers to be an absurd Gothic arched window, and he pulled over to make a sketch of that house and that composition, and then, recruited his sister and his dentist to pose for it. But like, there are certain elements I think that are always necessary. You can change some stuff, you can add some food, you can change some expression, you can relax the poses, but you've got to have the dots, you've got to have the window,
Yeah, there are certain iconic features that often figure into these parodies. So in some ways, they are experimenting, adapting, remixing these images, and in other ways staying faithful to the original. So it's kind of a balance of the two.
Yeah, it's an important balance. And, when I talk to students about like, how do we reimagine something but still keep it faithful to the original, I always will have students circle and then even just number certain elements that need to be there. Like the classic example I might give would be Van Gogh's Starry Night. I'm like, okay, we've got to have that sloped horizon. We have to have the moon up here. We have to have a vertical element, even if it's not a cypress tree. We have to have all these different things. And with American Gothic, we've got to have, two figures out in front of the house. We've got to have that pointed window. I always find that such a funny composition though, because there's a little ambiguity to it. Like how do you even read American Gothic? Because I'm thinking back to just when I did my Grant Wood episode and I was doing the research and having the discussion, one of the things that came up is even from the time it was made, people had mixed responses in terms of is this making fun of the rural folk who are out in Iowa and in this house and stuff like that? Or is this an embrace of the work ethic and the strong hands and the pitchfork as the tool of, the utilitarian, mindset of the people in the overalls and all that? How do you see that work?
Yeah, when I approach a painting like American Gothic, I think it lends itself to so many different interpretations. We have those two Midwestern farmers shoulder to shoulder, the woman wearing a patterned apron and brooch with this no-nonsense expression on her face, and the man bearing a pitchfork in one hand. So going back to the origins of this painting, as you're saying, when it was first unveiled, it was perceived by some as a caricature mocking a Midwestern way of life, and by others as a celebration of the dignity of ordinary farmers. And so something that I love about this painting is how it refuses to resolve itself. It could be praise of the American heartland. It could be satire. Grant Wood didn't give us any answers as to what side he wanted to land on. And I think that the ambiguity of this painting is one reason why it opens itself up to ongoing interpretation, reinvention, and parody, where you'll see a version of American Gothic with Barbie and Ken dolls posing as the two protagonists, or another version that I've seen where two Mexican immigrants replace Wood's white Midwestern protagonists as symbols of American strength and dignity. So this painting really leaves us with a lot of space to project our own imagination. And we bring a lot of our own assumptions about the American heartland to our viewing of this painting.
So now, as we shift our focus a little bit from like the original, because I have already bored the audience about that in a previous episode, what do you notice? What stands out about like the Trader Joe's adaptation of it?
I saw a parody of American Gothic at a Trader Joe's store in Chicago, not too far from the Art Institute of Chicago, where I was just looking around, admiring the artwork, and I looked over at the elevator doors part, and lo and behold, there was this American Gothic inspired painting inside the Trader Joe's elevator. In Trader Joe's version of American Gothic, the artist created a painting with a similar composition. We had a male and a female figure pressed side by side. But in this case, they were dressed up to look like Trader Joe's crew members or employees. So the woman was wearing a tropical print shirt, like one that Trader Joe's employees often wear, and holding a box of yellow Trader Joe's cereal. The man was wearing a short sleeve t-shirt and holding a bottle of wine as if ready to share it. Both figures appeared to be smiling just slightly. And Trader Joe's artist, while maintaining the composition of the original painting, really transformed the tone and the atmosphere. Whereas in the original painting by Grant Wood, the figures seem quite serious and perhaps a bit hostile. At Trader Joe's, they become these friendly and approachable faces of Trader Joe's brand.
Yeah, and just in case anybody is thinking that suggests they're too friendly and a couple or something like that, as we all know from Grant Wood's composition, it was his sister and his dentist, not a man and wife, very different age-wise. And actually, just a little fun fact, initially I think Grant Wood wanted to have his mom pose so that like the two figures would be closer to the same age, but then he opted for his sister because I think his mom just was not up for posing for that long. But the Trader Joe's adaptation, like you say, it changes the tone, it changes the attire, it changes the expression, but still in the sort of triangulating of the composition with the two figures and the house with the window and everything like that, we still have that element. When now, as I'm rambling a little bit, but it reminds me of one of the things that I read was Grant Wood's composition even was a little bit of a reference to something else, because I think in the like late 19th, early 20th century, there was this sort of trend of like documentary photographers going around and taking pictures of people, like the houses and the people who lived there standing out in front of the house. So you could see a similar sort of compositional strategy where it's like in the foreground, we have the people who live there and they're dwelling in the background. And I think, Grant Wood's idea was like, he saw this house that looked to him out of place because of that window. And he thought like, well, who are the kind of people that would live here? And that's what he wanted to paint.
Yeah, it is interesting to think about how so many artworks build on the story of what came before. So I think Grant Wood was looking at 19th century American portrait photography. He was also looking at Northern Renaissance painting, and he's bringing together all these different compositions in his own mind to create his work. And then by creating his work and setting it out into the world, he also opens it up for others to interpret and continue to riff on. So many of these artworks just echo throughout time and open themselves up to ongoing interpretation.
Yeah, it's just reference upon reference upon reference. And like, I feel like it gets to a point where the term meta isn't sufficient anymore, because it's like layer and layer upon meta and repackaging and reimagining and reinterpretation, but always referencing stuff that came before. Maybe that's just what culture's always doing. But I think it's interesting here to see it in the consumerist context, because I think there is an interesting leap that happens as art goes from the museum to the grocery store and other just aspects of popular culture. There's just like so much to unpack there. And maybe that's why it is such a great work to show up in these unexpected places. And that's why it's been so widely parodied, is because there's a little bit of malleability to it where you can adjust it to take on a different tone, or to meet the needs of the context it's put in, to, convince people to buy cans of corn or whatever's on sale, or, to put on a t-shirt, or to, what was the Boy Meets World? It was like a living painting where he disguised himself as the farmer in that. There are so many different ways that these images can be manipulated and used to suit different stuff. And I guess as I grapple for a way to wrap up the discussion here, the thing that I keep coming back to is how cool it is that art is used in so many ways to communicate these things. We see these symbols. I mean, in some ways, some artworks can even become like emojis and stuff like that, which emojis themselves are art that people have sat down and designed. So for me, the takeaway and what I love about this book, which I'm going to once again plug, and listeners, if you haven't already checked the show notes, link is down there. The Art of Trader Joe's helps us to see and appreciate the art that is all around us. As you're thinking about, like, again, just to wrap this up, what do you want listeners to pay attention to and to take note of and appreciate with the Art of Trader Joe's and in other contexts?
For me, the takeaway is that art is everywhere. Art is not something that we have to go out of our way to a museum to experience. It's something that we're immersed in, and that's a part of our everyday life, if only we take the time to notice and appreciate it. So I think that by being curious and looking closer at ordinary things, we can discover a lot of artistic hidden gems in the world around us. And that requires us to look up, look down, look in unexpected places, and you might be surprised at what you discover.
Yeah. And, for those who want to discover more and are not already loving this totally adequate podcast that deserves 5 stars on whatever platform you're listening on, I'm also going to point out and just shamelessly shill for Julie's other venture, the smarty.biz. You've got virtual museum tours that you put out for free for anyone who just wants to learn more and get more references as you're walking through the grocery store and in other places, and you see these works of art, want to know more about them, want to have some fun facts to drop at fashionable dinner parties and anything else like that. Be sure to check the links in the show notes. And once again, thank you so much for joining me, Julie Averbach. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
This concludes this week's episode of Who Arted, part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. If you found this tolerable, please leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast app. You can find images of the work being discussed this week and every week on social media at Who Arted Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, and of course on the website whoartedpodcast.com. Podcast done.